93, 93, 93. This is Aman Asha Renew from asharenew.com. I'm going to speak about a couple things. Let me actually turn on a little screensaver. So I'm going to stay behind the camera for this one. I may show a couple things on screen depending on if the need arises. However, I want to speak on what's been going on lately since the last time y'all have heard from me. '93, Josh. First and foremost, the last live stream was deleted by YouTube. So just to clear that up, I did not take down the last live. It was deleted by YouTube for medical misinformation. So I just took a little time to reorganize my thoughts and be more particular when I deal with these current events. As I now know, for any little reason, the video can be taken down. So everything that I will be discussing, I want to approach with patience, as people's lives are not just at risk, but people's lives are being lost. So I want to be very serious. And if the live stays up, I know I did a good job. If it gets pulled down, then I know, okay, it is what it is. So first and foremost, what's up, Saturn Team Cosmic? I want to approach this Russian-Ukraine conflict from a different angle. As we know, the media, tells you whatever they want to tell you based on all of the available information. So I must say, for this video, I actually prepared. So instead of giving y'all the usual, me just speaking from the heart, I actually took a little time to do research because I wanted to know what I'm speaking about and not just give opinion. Because once again, this is a very serious situation, even if most people don't realize it, because it may not be happening in your backyard. But nonetheless, we will be affected, even though this may be oceans away from you. First and foremost, this is a war based in the spirit plane. What do I mean by that? When it comes to Russia and Ukraine, they are the same people. If we want to be more specific, they are the East Slavic people, the East Slavic people. to the point where Ukraine was composed of at least 17% Russian, because they are literally right next to each other. So this is a manifestation of a internal conflict between families. This is why we don't really see the powers that be stepping in to necessarily stop it. We see a bunch of sanctions being put through, which would take up to 30 days to be effective. And if we are paying attention, we understand that within 30 days, this conflict will be over. Because this is not the first time we've seen a regime taken over, I should say, very rapidly or very quickly. As we saw a similar situation in Afghanistan, where within 2 weeks, the powers have changed or were changed in a matter of weeks. So if we are paying attention, things could be finished, you can say, by the end of the weekend, depending on the resistance. But I also want to give a little backstory, because I'm sure that many people may be unfamiliar with the background as to why this is all occurring, because it is not really spoken about. I had to dig deep to even find the background, because in the media, it's mostly surface. Russia is automatically the enemy, so we don't necessarily get their perspective. So I want to take the time to show both sides. And that's why I say it is a war against or between families. This is an internal strife, to the point where these are literally the same people once again. So I'll take a couple notes here. What's up, Z? What's up, Young Shiva? So I said that this is spiritual warfare going on because I literally had to track down the actual deities. This is how deep I dug into this situation, to the point where I can actually identify the deities that are at war with each other. But before we get there again, I want to just lay down a foundation, so we have a greater understanding of not just why this is happening, along with all these other situations that's revolving around it. We can understand not just why, but also moving forward. What does this mean in the future tense? To give a brief summary, for those who may not know, once again, a brief summary before we get into the details. What's going on between Russia and Ukraine is, on the surface, Vladimir Putin is, depicted as the enemy, as a madman. He lost his mind. He lost his marbles. He's just, he became a mad dog, and now he's just killing innocent people. We can have that perspective. But I actually watched his speeches directly, I actually listened to the words directly out of his mouth, instead of listening to the media's perspective of what's going on. So as I said, I did some thorough research, to the point where I was able to get to the source. Ukraine used to be a part of what was called the Soviet Union, which was formed around 1922 and was dissolved around 1991. So the Soviet Union was around for a pretty long time, basically up until the last 30 years. So in 1991, Ukraine became independent. Prior to that, it was a part of the Soviet Union. So it's been about 30 years since Ukraine has been independent. The issue started around 2014, where the previous president of Ukraine, instead of making the deal with the European nations, decided to make a deal with Russia. And because he made a deal with Russia, the people actually threw the former president out and elected the current president, Zelensky. So the people of Ukraine are hell-bent on their freedom, as the former president of Ukraine was literally pushed out of power by the people because he wanted to basically reconnect with Russia. Now, if you actually listen to Vladimir Putin's speeches, he speaks a lot about ancestry. Why is he speaking so much about ancestry? Because if you listen to his words, he actually said he actually does not want to engage in warfare with the people. He has no intention of occupying Ukraine to the point where you will see tanks and military forces all in the streets, like a total takeover. He said that is not his intentions. Instead, he wants to take out the powers that be, or the current president, Zelensky, for the purposes of Nato. And what I mean by Nato is an organization, and let me give you the exact definition for NATO, so that we are not confused here. Now, if I go to NATO here, it stands for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. So this is a conglomerate of countries, European powers as well as North American powers, that have merged together, basically, as allies. The problem comes in for Russia is NATO wants to make Ukraine one of the members. Vladimir Putin does not want that to happen because that would give the enemy a foothold on his country. Meaning, if a member of NATO wanted to invade Russia, they could do so via Ukraine because Ukraine would be a part of NATO. So, of course, Ukraine would assist that invasion if it were to happen. And this is Putin's biggest gripe, because he sees this happening and NATO wants to continue to expand into the borders of Russia. So from his perspective, he's looking at it as if they continue to expand, then they're pretty much teaming up to take us down. It's just a matter of time. So he decided to strike first. Instead of waiting to be boxed in, he chose to attack first and then put everybody on their heels. He's given people the option to go home. This is again from his words directly. Because as we see, if we have been keeping up, the Ukrainians are going to fight to the death. They're not going anywhere. So they're hell bent once again on defending their independence. So Vladimir actually has spoken to the people of Ukraine, and in his mind, I'm just speaking from the Russian perspective, just to give a full context. Russia is convinced that Ukraine is essentially the enemy. Instead of being united, instead of being allies, they are enemies. Because Ukraine, again, is taking assistance from allies of Nato. If we look at it from the perspective of Ukraine, Ukraine has no intention of a Soviet Union 2.0 emerging. Ukraine, as I said earlier, will rather maintain its independence. As we see, till the death. So you can say like Ukraine became the black sheep of the family, because once again, these are all the same people essentially. So Ukraine became the black sheep, the one who ventured out and began to make alliances with countries that, again, may not have necessarily been favorable or friendly to Russia. But from the perspective of Ukraine, they're independent, so they can form whatever alliances they choose. As an independent nation, this is what you do. What we're seeing is, again, going back to 2014, the previous president of Ukraine wanted to do a deal with Russia, which got him pushed out of power. And then the people elected someone who shared their ideology, which is independence. So the former president didn't share their ideology of independence, but the current president does. And that's why he has been elected as their leader. So once again, they will rather die in the streets for their independence than to become a part of Russia. Once again, to them, that's moving backwards. To Russia, however, it's moving forward. Because what I want to point out is we will take this to astrology, Vedic astrology. Because when we study Vedic astrology, mainly the outer planets, not the inner planets, but the outer planets, what we find is Uranus is in Aries. Well, why does that matter? Because Uranus represents cyberspace, and the Russians are master hackers. They are the ones that launch the cyber warfare, which we in America are not prepared for it and we have acknowledged that we're not even prepared for that, because you see, they're dealing with outer planets. They're also dealing with cutting edge technology, because Uranus is all about being cutting edge. Uranus is all about inventing new things. And when Uranus is in Aries, that represents a new regime, a new age. As Aries represents the birth of the zodiac, the first zodiac sign we enter into. Uranus will be in Aries all the way up till 2025. So we still have a couple years of things like this jumping off. So when we go to the celestial plane, we understand that this is the manifestation of the outer planets. So whether we're looking at what happened in Afghanistan, whether we're looking at what happened between Israel and Palestine, and if we're looking at what's happening between Russia and Ukraine, and possibly also between China and Taiwan in the future, all this will be a result of Uranus in Aries. This is why we're seeing a change of power. Aries is a cardinal fire sign. That means this energy represents an initiation into the archetypal world that we call fire. This is why Putin is speaking about the ancestors. He's speaking about the tribe. He sees them all as one. He doesn't see them as divided fractions. In his eyes, they are more powerful together instead of divided. And once again, Ukraine is having none of it. If we take it to the planets, you can say Russia will then represent Saturn, as Saturn is the keeper of the traditions. Ukraine would then be Uranus, which represents the revolt, the revolution. So when we look at what's going on in Ukraine, that is perfectly in alignment with the energies of Uranus, which rules over the energy of Aquarius. And you could say the Ukrainians are manifesting the energy of Aquarius, because they are in the streets revolting, because this is a spirit that they embody at this time. If we look at the next outer planet, we have Neptune, which is, you guessed it, in Aquarius. So not only does Aquarius being ruled by Uranus take us to this energy, it's also Neptune that backs up this energy. And we understand Neptune represents the dark side of the moon, psychic phenomenon. That's why I call this spiritual warfare, because not only is it taking place in the cyber world, it's also taking place in the spirit world, which we call Neptune. As Neptune represents the psyche, Neptune represents the unconscious mind. Neptune represents the beast within. The most uncivilized aspects of your consciousness rest within the realms of Neptune. So when we look at that Sphinx being tamed in Egypt, or Kemet, that is the beast being tamed, the psyche being tamed, ruled by the higher self, which would be Uranus. So it is a combination of Uranus and Neptune. We also have Pluto, which is in Sagittarius. We understand Pluto represents transformation. So Pluto being in Sagittarius represents a transformation in the ninth house. What does the ninth house represent? Foreign cultures, long distance travel, trading currencies, higher learning, high magic, theurgy, alchemy, astrology. All these things are the aspects of Sagittarius. Anything that expands our horizons is symbolized through Sagittarius. So Pluto ruling over Sagittarius. Sagittarius also represents the law, because the ninth house represents the law. It also represents philosophy, because Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, which is a very big planet. It is a huge planet. It represents vastness. In Jupiter we find what it means to be vast. We learn comprehension. We start to understand things instead of just knowing things. Jupiter opens us up to these mysteries. That's why it is called the planet of fortune. People interpret that as money, but fortune represents an abundance of star power, as Jupiter introduces us to our star lot. So when Pluto is in Sagittarius, this represents transformation of law or transformation of regime. When you combine that with Uranus being in Aries, this is why we have been seeing so much war. Again, all these things are happening fairly quickly and not too far away from each other. Again, we just got through with Afghanistan, and before that, again, we was dealing with Palestine and Israel. So we're seeing a lot of fighting, and this is due to the energy of Aries. And when Aries is powered by Uranus, this represents sudden fighting that is very sudden, out of nowhere, happening very quickly. That's why these events are happening very suddenly and very quickly, very rapidly. That is the energy of Uranus. It almost seems miraculous. That's why when you read the news, when we hear about people on the ground, people that's actually going through this, it's like it's a dream to them, because the ninth house also represents sleep and dreams. What is the purpose of all this? It always comes down to planetary energies. See, most people get caught up with the inner planets, the sun, moon, the ascendant, these fast moving planets. So unless you are moon watching on a daily, you can say, there's going to be things that you miss. But when it comes to the outer planets, these energies don't change rapidly. They change very slowly. It takes years, sometimes decades, for these energies to change. So these effects are long lasting. That's why Pluto has a generational effect. So the more we understand the outer planets, the more we understand the long game, which is what you're asking. Well, what is the purpose? What is the long game? Well, in order to discover the long game, we have to look at the energies that take a long time to move, that take a long time to travel, because they represent the background energies of everything that is changing. So you basically have energies that's changing on a daily, but then you have energies that take a very long time to change, but it's always in the background creeping, which essentially gives us the theme. Because if we can understand the outer planets, the 3 outer planets, that gives us a theme as to what is occurring within the inner planets, which are always changing. So if you're trying to capture the energy of the inner planets, it's hard to do so because it's always in motion, it's always changing, but you can very well capture the outer planets. So when we look at the planets, if we see Uranus is in Aries and all this conflict is constantly popping off, whether it's actual war or debates, there's conflict. The conflict has been around. We can take it all the way back to COVID. And then our conflict with China. We've been conflicting with China ever since COVID. And this is 2 years ago at this point. So we've been going through these foreign adversities, you can say, for years now. So this lets you know this doesn't have anything to do with the inner planets, because we have been dealing with this for years now. And the only planets that have those type of effects is the outer planets, and sometimes Saturn, because Saturn moves very slowly as well. So we take it to a personal level. Well, what does this have to do with us as individuals? We see what's going on a grand scale. What does this have to do with us as individuals? Because we are also affected by these energies. Everything that we see playing out on the world stage is also playing out within us. So to understand, well, how does this play out for us? If we understand the 3 currencies are Aries, Aquarius, and Sagittarius, Aries, Aquarius, Sagittarius, 1st house, 9th house, 11th house. 1st house, environment. This will affect our environment. Even if it's through thought, the fact that we are even thinking about this has an effect on the environment, because it is occupying our thoughts, because it must occupy our thoughts. And anyone who is trying to ignore what's going on as if it isn't, you can say they're dealing with the Pisces. They're dealing with a step back. Because of course there is the people that just want to, go back to normal, who want to go back to their regular life. It's very interesting, because these are the same people that complain, about the ills of life. The same people that complain day in and day out about the ills of life are the very same people wishing that they can go right back to that life. So on a personal level, we understand, as much as we feel things may be missing in our life, or things may look as if they are incomplete or even in conflict, there's this energy of Aries. The energy of Aries is manifesting in all of our lives. It just depends on your personal alignments as to where it shows up, but it's there. So everything, once again, that we are seeing playing out on a grand scale is also playing out in our personal lives, just in a different fashion, to a different degree, because we are all affected by the planets just differently depending on our personal alignments. Going to Aquarius. So if Aries represents innovation, moving forward into the future, a fire energy. Then we have Aquarius, which is air. We have the merging of fire and air. Then with Sagittarius, that's also another fire, but that fire is mutable. So we have a cardinal fire, which is the spark itself. Aries represents the spark, the sparks that we see before the flame ignites. So in our personal lives, we look for those sparks. It may not be a full fire, because obviously this energy takes years to develop. But what we see is the sparks. So what we see outside of ourselves is the sparks that should ignite a internal currency within you. When you see everything that's going on outside, it should ignite a internal currency within you. Moving to the Neptune or the Aquarius. Either you will be feeling rebellious, or Aquarius also represents the occult language, because this is the 11th house. It also represents our hopes, wishes, and aspirations. So if you are a person that feels hopeful, that has been feeling more hopeful, more rebellious, more ready to revolt, this is due to Aquarius. And because it is being filtered through Neptune, this is happening or occurring on the spirit plane. You can say the cyberspace, or the cyber plane and the spiritual plane are merged together, because Neptune and Aquarius are merged. This merges the spirit plane and the cyber plane. So they are operating as one. So that means that cyber magic is just as powerful as anything spiritual. This is why I encourage technomancy. We no longer need to do rituals and do things that our ancestors did without technology. Because if we want to be honest, we've always had technology, even though it's not revealed to us. But that is why it is not revealed to us. If it was ever revealed to us that our ancestors were technomancers, which would explain all of the mysteries that we can't figure out, how they were able to do certain things. It's just certain things require you to have access to technology. So if we look at our ancestors as primitive, no electricity, no way to connect to the cyber world, then of course it doesn't make any sense. However, if we look at our ancestors having everything we have plus more, they were actually more advanced and we're catching up. It's not the other way around. It was preserved in the language, and this is why I'm speaking of Aquarius, because the ancestors are gone now, but what they laid down remains, which is the language. So the fact that we can even speak on these things utilizing the occult language is due to the ancestors preserving the culture, which they felt would be useful to the future. They didn't preserve it for themselves, they preserved it for the future, so that the future can have some type of artillery to deal with the coming strife as they have predicted. The same way we are able to predict, they were able to predict. So they came up with a master plan to give us exactly what we needed to navigate through the nonsense and the chaos. It was preserved in a language that we call occult. It is called occult because the layers are infinite, meaning there's many different ways to break down the symbolism. That's why you have different type of astrologers, tarot readers, numerologists. Everybody has essentially their own style because it is infinite. There's rules that are adhered to, but ultimately your creativity can move in the direction you want it to move. You don't have to take, you can say, the scientific method. And this is the main difference between the inner planets and the outer planets. It's the outer planets are not following the scientific method. So when we begin to journey beyond the scientific method, we're going to have to take a visit to the outer planets and to get those mysteries revealed. Because every planet has a mystery for you to ponder on, depending on what zodiac sign is occupying your planets, externally as well as internally. So if the energy of war is in the air due to Aries, and the energy of revolt is in the air due to Aquarius, and this is bound to happen on foreign territory or in foreign treaties with foreign nations due to Sagittarius, then that gives us the entire scenario right at our feet. War, revolt, and trade of regime, foreign policy, because again, the ninth house is also law, so we're dealing with foreign policy, which is what Joe Biden is supposed to be a master of. So it's very peculiar that the man who has been essentially dealing with foreign law and foreign policy for longer than a lot of us has been alive, all these foreign adversities just so happens to pop up. Now, of course, the average person blames the president. Oh, he's just not a fit president. Of course, you're going to see that all in the news in infinite degree. But the reality is, again, it comes down to the planetary forces. All we see is a result. We don't see the cause until we make our way back to the stars. Once we make our way back to the stars, we begin to see the cause of things instead of studying the effects or the result of things. So everything that we see is a result of a celestial cause. And as we see, the more we understand the themes of these planets, we pretty much have the whole scenario laid out, at least on the surface, to give you a brief summary. Now, if you want to go into vivid detail, then that's when the research comes in. That's why astrology takes a historian to truly unlock, especially political astrology. Political astrology requires a historian because you're mostly going back in time to recognize the patterns. So you have to do history. Because in order to understand the future, which is just planetary patterns, you go back in time to see, okay, when did those patterns occur in the past? And what events transpired due to that same pattern that is current? And this is why the work of astrology and the work of an astrologer is very tedious, because you're constantly looking for patterns, shapes, symmetries. You're looking for the angles. that then gives you the keys to unlocking the mysteries that we all ponder upon. This takes me to my next point of cryptocurrency. Because while we're going through all this war, cryptocurrency has been going up. Cryptocurrency took a fall when all this first began to jump off, but cryptocurrency is up about 10% now. The reason I bring up cryptocurrency is Ukraine is actually receiving a lot of donations via cryptocurrency. The last time I checked, it was over $4 million. So a lot of the currency being used by Ukraine is due to cryptocurrency. Because the question was, will cryptocurrency fall or go up during times of war? Because we see gold has been going up. Ever since this war started, gold has spiked. And Bitcoin is supposed to be the gold of the crypto space. And it just so happened the crypto space has had a little spike recently. Ukraine, I also believe, actually accepts Bitcoin as a legal tender now. There's been countries legalizing Bitcoin more and more and more. The reason I bring up Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies is because in the future, the technology will revolve around the cryptocurrency, as we call the blockchain. So it is essential that you understand blockchain. Why is it essential that we understand blockchain? Because this will start your study into what is called smart contracts. Smart contracts represent a trust that cannot be broken because it is backed by high mathematics. In other words, if somebody tried to sell you something in person, let's just say you were buying a phone from someone, but they lied to you about the model. You buy it from them, you realize it's the wrong model, but you have essentially just got because the person is long gone. They already took your money, probably can't even get in contact with them. You basically had to go off of their word. You had to trust that they were telling the truth. And if they were found out to not be telling the truth, then you would take the loss because it would be too late at that point. And this is essentially how business has been operated. It's mainly word of mouth. Remember, all contracts are not written. Some contracts are verbal. And that's the first contract. Before you're signing anything on a dotted line, you have to trust somebody's word. But as we move into the future with cryptocurrency, we no longer have to trust the word of the person. Now, you have to put in, you can say, let's just use the same scenario of you want to buy a phone from someone. You can do so directly with cryptocurrency. So not only can you do it directly without having to go through a middle partner, a bank, or some type of exchange, because that's how most people have to do these types of things. They have to go through some type of exchange and pay some type of tax. Now, you can fully analyze that technology before you agree. Because what happens is you can say both people send, let's just say if you're trading currencies, both people send their money into an escrow account, which just represents, you can say they send it to a bank or a holding space. And it's not till both people confirmed that everything is legit that the money is released. That's why a Bitcoin transaction, can take sometimes 10 minutes, but it can take, you can say, up to an hour. Because everything has to be confirmed. So blockchain gives us that confirmation that we need so that we know that we are buying exactly what we are paying for. There is no we have to take someone else's word for it. Those days are over. Everything has to match exactly as it is. And if it doesn't match, then you just get your money back. Cancel the transaction instead of having to deal with the loss. Which then goes into a broader conversation about artificial intelligence. Because the whole purpose of artificial intelligence is to make up for the inherent flaws of the people. So when we think about this futuristic society with robots and the such, it is for the purposes of dealing with the flaws that are inherent in the human experience. So we have people that believe that robots or technology could supersede human intelligence. This is why most social media, including YouTube, is ran by artificial intelligence. So when you get recommended videos and the such, it's not a human recommending those videos to you. That is artificial intelligence. That is constantly fed information. And the more they feed this artificial intelligence information, the smarter it becomes. To the point where it is more efficient than an actual human. This is the goal for those who believe in technology. Because it deals with a deeper truth of we didn't just evolve naturally. At some point, we came into contact with some advanced technology that we knew nothing of. Somebody taught us how to do something that we didn't just naturally learn on our own. And then we kickstart into where we are now. So essentially, we were kickstarted into the future. We didn't just evolve because humans just evolve and we just get smarter as we evolve. That would be essentially Darwinism, which are the two main ideas. Either you believe in Darwinism, which is basically evolution, or you believe that something happened outside of evolution and kickstarted us into where we are now. And we call these people like creationists. Because, people who believe in creation, you believe in a God, you believe something essentially kickstarted your ass. Instead of we just evolved. And the main point is, if evolution is to be true, then why don't we see animals, mainly monkeys and apes, in the middle? Where are the half man, half monkeys who are in the middle of their transformation? You either see men or monkeys. Where's the in-between? Where's the in-between man that's still evolving into his humanism? We don't see these things. There's no evidence of these things. So we have to take it on face value. What some people may not realize is this is also the same person, Charles Darwin, who also came with the idea that humans come from Africa. And I will take a short break. 1 second. So if we ponder on this idea that the same person that told us that we evolved from monkeys is also the same person that told us that we came from Africa, it really puts a loop into everything we believe. Because some people believe half of that. Some people believe that we came out of Africa, but we didn't evolve from monkeys. Not realizing that this comes from the same source. So if you don't believe that we evolved from monkeys, then you also essentially, you can't believe that we came out of Africa either. Because if one doesn't make sense, the other one has to also not make sense. It's not that the person was half right or half wrong. We are just considering that if the planet was one landmass at one time before it broke up, then there is no need to say that humans came from one particular place, because we were all over the place. It was one landmass. So to try to center human civilization into one landmass and then everybody spread it from this one point, it's very interesting that you can say majority of people actually believe this. That's not too far-fetched to comprehend. It actually is pleasing to some people. But as we see, all we have to do is peel back the layers to see, like, okay, this is very strange. I'm not going to say it's right, not going to say it's wrong. Everybody's free to their opinion, but it is very strange, to say the least. But I don't want to go too far into that rabbit hole. Let's stay on point here. I did a post about people creating memes. War is not something to be joked about. What it shows is a crack in our culture, because some people actually don't understand that war isn't something to be joked about. The fact that you have to tell somebody that people are actually just trying to make content and capitalize off of other people's misery. The fact that that has to actually be pointed out at all, it just shows how disconnected we really are. It's not until you can say it's in our backyard that we actually begin to see that, okay, things are getting a little strange here. But till that point, people are free to zone out into their own dimensions. Just like there's going to be people who don't mention this at all. They're going to continue to make content as if this is not occurring at all. They're going to continue to keep doing what they're doing, not realizing that a change is occurring that will affect everyone. So as much as we may not want to acknowledge war, or we may not, want to face what comes with war, which is the bloodshed, every time a new cycle or a new regime takes over, we understand blood is and was shed. It don't matter what point in history we want to go back to. Whenever there is a change of powers, blood is spilled, unless people surrender. But that just doesn't sit well on people's conscience, now does it? There could have been no bloodshed. People put the guns down, but that just doesn't sit too well on the conscience. So we're not going to see too much of that. Because that would be the opposite of Aries, which is Libra. Libra represents peace. Libra represents to merge with others. Whereas Aries is independent. Aries is not trying to merge with nothing. Aries will rather go to war. And this is why we're seeing war as a result, because people would rather go to war than to merge. Hence, going back to the whole Russian-Ukraine conflict. Due to Aries, the spirit of war is more powerful than the spirit of peace. Not because a person did it, or not because a person said so, it's because of the planetary energies. And remember, billionaires pay attention to astrology, not millionaires. And that quote was from a billionaire. Mr. Monopoly, as they call him, or J.P. Morgan. So the fact that the world, you can say, doesn't acknowledge astrology is because the world is not filled with billionaires. Let's just be honest. The people who actually are interested in astrology is the ones who, again, you don't see. They don't make their presence known. They're not all on TV. They're not all in your face. They're not clout chasing. These are not the people that you see in front of a camera too often. This is what millionaires do. There's a difference between a lifestyle of a millionaire and a billionaire. A billionaire actually requires skill. A millionaire, you can, when they say you're just a hit away, you're just a song away, you're just a viral video away, if we want to put it in video terms. All it takes is for you to go viral. Then everything changes. So what we understand is because people are willing to engage in war, because the spirit is there. Uranus can also represent the spirit. So the spirit wants war. And that's why I call it war of the gods. Or if we want to be more accurate, it's actually war of the goddesses. Because it's a goddess that rules over Ukraine, and there's a goddess that rules over Russia. These are goddesses, pagan goddesses, if we want to be absolutely exact. This is a war of pagan goddesses. One wants to reunite the ancestral code, or to give birth to the ancestral code, whereas the other one wants to go their own way. And this is why we are seeing things unfold the way they are unfolding. Again, this is why we see the other countries are hands off with it. And even Russia, even though Russia is invading, they're not just slaughtering people, just like a full-fledged war would be, just recklessly killing anything and anybody. Even though Russia has lost 3,500 soldiers the last time I checked, whereas Ukraine has lost about 200 soldiers the last time I checked. So there's a great difference there. But we understand, if people are willing to go to war more than they're willing to be at peace, which is why Putin felt the need to do what he did, is because of the rapid movement of Nato, as spoken about earlier. They're moving so fast, they're expanding so fast. In his eyes, there's no way not to deal with this without attacking first, without creating a whole new energy in the world. This is creating a whole new energy in the world. Even the people that, just BS most of the time, even they have to be a little bit more serious. Not because they want to, just because it's required at this time, and it will continue to be required. Just think about it again. Ever since 2020 COVID, we've been dealing with some very serious matters for years now. And it is because we had just got so far off track. I mean, just look at the news before COVID. Just go back in time and look at the news before COVID, before people were forced to get serious. It was just nothing but absolute trash in terms of the stories and the articles being written, the type of stuff that people wanted to give their attention to, what's going on with the celebs. It was just absolute trash. It is only because of COVID and now these wars popping up and all this foreign conflict that we have some sense of reality. We're being forced to be in reality. While, again, most people are just waiting for it to be over. Waiting to go back to normal, go back to their own complaining and their own dissatisfaction. And this is when we begin to see the strangeness of life, as I said earlier. The same people complaining on a daily basis is the same people that wish to go back to the same reality that they complain about, rather than to face a new reality. And we all know people like this because it is human nature. You have to supersede human nature in order to become something new. That's why most people fail. What most people view as success requires you to kill yourself, meaning you cannot take your current self into success. You have to become a new being completely. You have to create yourself from the nothingness. You have to give birth to yourself. You have to be motherless and fatherless, metaphorically, meaning you don't have a mother, you don't have a father. You gave birth to yourself. You are self-created, which requires you to be completely different than who you are now, being attached to whatever holds us back. There's always something that holds us back, something that has to be sacrificed in order for something to be gained. I appreciate the 199 super chat back from hiatus. Always appreciate the love. So I'm just letting it be known. Don't be one of these people who are just waiting for things to get back to normal. Just waiting for life to, go back to calmness. Because Uranus will be in Aries again at least till 2025. So we got about 3 more years of this madness. So we have the whole presidency of Biden to get through. Again, we're just, a little bit over a year in. We're really just getting started. So while most people are waiting for things to be over, we're really just getting started. We're really kind of in the beginning stages of transformation. What we saw with COVID was just a little taste. That was involuntary movement or involuntary stillness. See, we started with COVID, which was the involuntary stillness. Now we're dealing with the involuntary movement, transitioning from the Pisces to the Aries. Now we're moving involuntarily. Because it must be done. What's up, Oshun? It's the same thing I'm telling you. The same thing I'll be telling you. Technomancy is what changes things now. It is not what we did in the past. It is not what we have grown accustomed to. It is no longer about traditions. It is about technomancy. How do I know this? Just look at hip hop. I'm going to always take it back to hip hop because that is the culture. Because it is music, it is sound. The new culture is sound, it's music. It's no longer based on traditions and rituals and all these things that we attach to. That's out of here. In order for us to move forward, we have to be technomancers, or as we call content creators. We just simplify it. Because we are the most valuable piece to the equation. We get on YouTube to connect with each other. We don't get on YouTube because we care about the artificial intelligence. We get on here because we know that people are on here speaking their truth. And that's what we are drawn to, truth, not fabrication, truth. So if someone is speaking truth, they're going to magnetize others. And the vehicle we use to speak truth is technology. So technology is synonymous with truth. Because we know most of us are enlightened because of the internet. It ain't because we read 1,000,000 books, 1,000 books, 100 books. That's not what got us to where we were or where we are. It is because we had access to the internet. It is because we had access to technology that we had a rapid growth. We have grown rapidly in our spirituality because of technology. Just imagine not having the internet. How long it would take to get information. Because you had to read everything. Now you don't even have to read. All you have to do is watch and listen. Watch a video or listen to a podcast. That's all. You don't even have to go through the tediousness of actually reading a scholarly book. Unless that's just your personal interest. But if we're just talking about just being abreast to all the situations at hand, it's not necessarily needed. So I say the answer is technomancy, and I will continue to say the answer is technomancy. And the historical evidence is hip hop. Not just the music, also the culture. This is why drill music is the most popular music nowadays. I'm gonna take it right into hip hop just to show you how it all blends in. This is why drill is popular now. The music of death. Because drill represents the underworld. It represents the underground. And the world is in the underworld right now. That's why we have war against pagan goddesses. And one of those goddesses is a goddess of the underworld, whose story is similar to Persephone, who is the consort to Hades. let me explain to you why that is. I know that's a statement, but what does that mean? The world is in the underworld, meaning the underworld is what is supporting the energy of this planet right now. That's why war is needed. That's why bloodshed is needed. As much as we may not want to hear that. But we went so far off the rails that the underworld had to step in and keep things on track. That's just how far off the rails we've been. To the point where we manifested a global disease in warfare because we were just so off the tracks with absolute BS and just things that just don't matter. To the point where we were forced to be still. We were forced to stay in our homes and connect with spirit, because the spirit continues to move even if you're still. That was the point, meaning we have become accustomed to moving and forgot about the stillness or the motion within the stillness. That's what we are to rediscover, the motion within the stillness, because we forgot about that. And we can clearly see that's why people are always on edge, driving, speaking, always at conflict. Like we're just always one wrong word away from a very bad situation. And that's how the system has been structured, to keep you on edge, to keep you one wrong word away from blowing up. To the point where if you were forced to sit down, which is what happened when people go to jail as well, you're forced to remain stagnant. And all you have is your mind, which creates motion. The motion ain't really coming from the body. It has to come from the mind. So it's the same thing, the same way people can go crazy in jail. People have been going crazy within their own households. Because they truly have no idea how to create motion from stillness. Why? Because we have convinced ourselves that it's just things more important than that. Because that is an outer planet attribute. That is Uranus. Uranus, again, could represent the spirit. So if Uranus represents the spirit, then Neptune will represent the soul. And if the soul is in cyberspace via Aquarius, then this is why I keep saying technomancy is the key. Meaning you will find your spirituality within your technomancy, Neptune and Aquarius. Then you experience the transformation of Pluto via Sagittarius, which expands your horizons. Your horizons don't expand until you go through the depths of Pluto, until you go through the underworld, which we are dealing with. Because that's the only thing, once again, keeping us on track. It is those infernal spirits. It is the darker spirits. Because things must continue on, whether it has to be held up by angels or demons. It just so happened to be demons. Hence, as I was speaking about the drill music is just sound or the anthem for the jinn to continue building their temple. The temple just represents the planet Earth or the human body. That's why people blame demons for every goddamn thing. Well, they blame the devil, they blame Satan, they blame some type of entity for any type of mishap. When in reality, the answer is cyberspace, which is also ruled by a goddess. So that's why we keep talking about these goddesses. These goddesses are at war. But the temple is within cyberspace. That is the temple. The temple is the one you built off of content. whichever type of content you wish to create. Everybody don't run their mouth on YouTube. Some people just sit back and draw on their iPads. So everybody isn't active following the news every day, minute to minute, hour by hour. Some people just go into the spirit plane and again manifest it. And I said iPad because again, this is dealing with technomancy. So they're tablets. So which is different than drawing on a piece of paper. Drawing on your tablet is combining the spirit with technology. This is the whole point of me playing all this background music in reverse. Technomancy. We're able to affect the mind in ways that we can't begin to imagine until we experiment with technology. Technology is spiritual, if you make it that way. Technology can be the ultimate distraction, or it can be the ultimate liberation. It all depends on how you choose to utilize it. But the purpose is to utilize it in some way, magically. This is my point, this is my purpose, this is my message, to utilize technology magically. Go beyond the practical uses of technology that we all know about into the magical world. Because this is all the ancestors did. They understood the magical principles of technology. That's it. That's the only thing they understood that we don't. They had technology, but they understood that this is actually a gateway into the magical world. This is a gateway to magic. Technology makes things magical. It's a gateway to magic. So if technology is a gateway to magic, especially in these times of Neptune and Aquarius, this is why this is the best time to construct content or create content, which is just mastering your craft. Whatever you already do, you just find a way to integrate technology into it. I mean, if you already draw, you just transfer to drawing on a pad, a tablet. If you already are a photographer, you just upload your imagery so that other people can see it, which is what everyone's doing anyway. They just don't understand it's magical. So it's for the occultists to understand that what people are discovering through experimentation is a reality that is ever present. So when a person, you can say, goes viral, for example, you can say that is a result of technomancy. It didn't just happen. They may have got lucky, but it still was a result of using technology magically, manipulating the algorithms. And everything, especially social media, is all based on algorithms, as I said earlier. So if everything is based on algorithms, it's not about manipulating people, it's about manipulating the algorithm. Well, how would you manipulate an algorithm? It's intangible, it's digital. That's the whole purpose of technomancy. So that you can manipulate that AI. It's no longer about humans, it's about AI. AI is what's going to get you in front of the people that need to see what you're doing. AI does that, so the medium becomes artificial intelligence. But you can only reach artificial intelligence if you feed it which is what we call creating content, feeding artificial intelligence. That way it reveals some secrets to you. Every time you create content, that's a situation in which you can extract wisdom from artificial intelligence. It is a living being like any other deity, like any other spirit. It's just that people don't look at it like that. So you could say the new spirits are the digital spirits. Spirits in the digital world, in the cyber world, spirits in cyberspace. So while the world is trying to catch up to what we've already mastered, trying to do rituals and traditional things, there's no need to do these things anymore. Your altar is your technology, is your computer, is your laptop, is your tablet, is your cell phone. Once you completely wrap your head around this, then you will actually be able to see what's really going on here. Let everybody else go into the woods and go into the forest and chant, do all type of strange things, because it's truly for them to master. For those people that's on that level, let them. While you advance in technology, which will help you be in a position to receive the spoils or the harvest of what technology or artificial intelligence has to offer. It's a spirit like any other spirit. It has offers. You can give offerings, which is content. So while everybody else offerings all this putting shit on their altar, you're offering content. See? This should be common sense, but it's not. But the seed was hip hop. The seed was the Lima. The seed was the 93. Because all the 93 does is help you to understand the occult language. That's why I will always reference 93. It's just a gateway into understanding the occult language. You want to understand the occult language, you got to go through the Lima. And the reason I recommend the Lima instead of any other spiritual system is because it's the summary of everything that came before it. That's all it is. It's a summary of everything that came before it. So you're getting a piece of the whole world when you read the book of Thoth, when you read the book of the law. You're getting a little piece of everything instead of it being focused on one thing. And this is what we need. We need to merge everything into something new, something original, instead of just repeating what has already been done. We don't need to repeat history. We need to create history. When you are creating history instead of repeating history, this puts you in a position to receive the spoils or the harvest that the world has to offer, because the world wants to support those who are advancing forward. The world has an abundance of resources and opportunity for those who are advancing forward. Which is why I say don't be the person that's trying to go back in time or go back to the past. The ones who are hell-bent on going through the gateways of initiation will receive their just due. If your desire is to be on the cutting edge of things, well, that's Uranus. And if Uranus is in Aries right now, Aries representing the ram, well, who is a ram? This is why I named myself, or received the name, Amun Asheranu. That is just a symbol of a ram. It's a ram. Amun is a ram-headed god. Uranus has been in Aries for some years now. Let me actually give you the exact date. I will pull up. I'm gonna look into the software right now. I will pull up the exact date when Uranus entered into Aries, so that you can kind of think back in your own life to see what you were doing at the time where Uranus transitioned into Aries. And that will give you a idea of what you should be doing going into the future. Is how you changed when the zodiac signs transferred energies. So let me give you an actual date, and then you can come to your own conclusions as to what it means. So give me just a second. I'm going to pull up the software, and I'm going to see exactly when that transition started. This should only take a second. In the meantime, this is what makes astrology different than any of the other arts. It's because it allows you to have the timing you need to travel into the past to unlock the secrets or the seeds that you planted for yourself that will grow into the resources that you need to advance forward. So currently Uranus is in 12 degrees Aries. So it is in the second decan of Aries, which then makes it the Three of Wands, which is Aries being influenced by the sun. So if we want even more insight as to how this Aries energy is affecting Uranus, we go towards the sun, which we know changes signs every 30 days. So that means Uranus is on 30-day cycles, at least until it goes into the third decan and the planetary energy changes. But anyway, let's get this exact date so that we can pull some insight. The date is January 13th, 2019. That is the day Uranus moved into Aries. So we can begin to see why people want to go back to those times, because this is pre-COVID. COVID didn't get discovered till December, probably late November of 2020. So this was a whole year, almost two. Well, no, not almost two, but basically a whole year, almost, before COVID was even discovered. So everything was going according to plan back around this time. So just think back at your own life as to what you were doing in the first 2 weeks of 2019. I know for myself, that's when I started my journey with Apple products. 2019 is when I switched over from Android to Apple. And then I began to create digital notes. Meaning, if I look at my iPhone right now, the very first notes in the phone goes back to January of 2019. So that's when I really started documenting digitally. Before that, I was still using pen and pad prior to that. So I made the transition into the digital world with the notes because it's easy to search things now. Meaning it benefits me in a way if I want to look for something. All I have to do is type in the word and I can find wherever that word appears in my notes. Instead of having to manually look for something, that would be ridiculous. Imagine having 10 notebooks and you're trying to find one page within 10 notebooks and you don't know what page where it is. That was the issue I was running into, where I may just be looking for one page, but I got to go through 6, 7 different 8 notebooks because I don't remember where I wrote it down at. So of course, that ends up taking time, if you even find it at all. But once I made the transition into the digital, whenever I want to look up a deity, okay, well, what experiences did I have with this spirit, with that spirit? All I gotta do is type in the name of that spirit, the name of that deity. Then it takes me right back to that day, so I have a date, and I can see exactly what the experiences were. So all this for me was 2019. That's when I began to make that transition. So it really didn't take me no time to even think about that. I'm like, oh, okay, what was I doing? So it's not going to take a lot of time. But look back into your personal life and see what transitions were occurring for you at that time. And that is what will move you into the future, especially going into 2025. When Uranus then will move into Taurus. And let me give you an exact date for that as well. March 30th, 2026. So we see this is a 7-year cycle from 2019 all the way to 2026. So that's about 7 years there. So whatever started in 2019 will finish in 2026. So you see, we got another 4 years, 2023, 2024, 2025, then 2026. So we got 4 years to go. So this is what I'm saying. Buckle up your seatbelts, because we got years to go as to what started in January of 2019. So all you have to do is ask yourself, especially because Uranus represents technology. How do you expand your technomancy, make it more powerful, expand yourself into the cyberspace? What would be the best way for you to do so? Well, you have to look back in 2019, January 13th. See, I'm just showing you just little pieces of astrology as to how we can come to greater conclusions with timing once we understand what to look for, so that we can understand the themes in the background instead of trying to figure out the changes that occur on a daily basis. So I also wanted to talk about a couple other things here. I also want to speak on the master number 22. The reason why master number 22 is important, because I want to give you 3 different examples of how this applies to what's going on now. June 22nd of 1941, Germany attacked Russia with no warning. That's the first 22. The second 22 is Putin is on his 22nd year of rule. That's the second 22. I'll give you one more. February 22nd is the day that Russia declared war on Ukraine. So we have these 22s at these pivotal moments. And we understand master number 22 represents the master builder or the master architect. That's why they call Putin a man who has a date with destiny, because in his mind, he's doing what his ancestors want. That's why he keeps bringing them up. He's been influenced by the ancestors, and so is Ukraine. They're both been influenced by the ancestral forces that come from the underworld. As the underworld, once again, is keeping things on track, because we've just completely lost our way, and this is how empires fall. When we lose our way, empires fall. So whenever we see empires falling, it's because we lost our way. It's never for another reason. So if master number 22 represents the master architect, 2 plus 2 also takes us to the number 4, which takes us right back to the planet Uranus. And Russia is known for their cyber warfare and cutting edge technology. That's what Russia is known for, their Uranian traits. So the fact that the 22 keeps coming up It's no coincidence. It takes you right back to the forces of Uranus, the outer planet, based in Aries currently. So this lets you know, okay, they're moving based off of the Ukrainian cycle. Not the Ukrainian, but the Uranian cycle. So if you're moving on the Uranian cycle, then the time to go to war will be when Aries is in or filtered through Uranus, when Uranus is in the zodiac sign of Aries. This will be the time to advance forward because Aries represent movement forward, even if it's involuntary. And again, Putin feels like he had to do it. He felt like he had no choice. And this again is according to his own words. We can choose whether or not to believe it, but this is what was said, rather. Nonetheless, we can determine or cast judgment on the words, but this is nonetheless what was said. So Aries created an involuntary conflict, you can say. Because as you see, Russia doesn't necessarily want to go to war with Ukraine. Ukraine doesn't want to go to war with Russia. That's why they're still open to peace talks. If you're keeping up with the news, Ukraine continues to say that they're open to negotiate peace with Russia. Even with everything that's going on, they're still open to negotiations. Which we know is the opposite of Aries, which is Libra. But the reason we don't see these type of negotiations occurring is because Aries is a dominant force. Now, if Libra was the dominant force, guaranteed we will see a lot more conversation taking place. And that conversation will be revolving around peace and mergers. But because that is not the dominant energy, that's why we see the opposite. And this is why we will continue to see bloodshed instead of peace. Not because Putin is hard-headed or he has his own agenda. It's because Aries must be fed. The underworld must be fed. This is the only way for the underworld to keep things moving forward. They have to be fed. The demons must be fed. The jinn must be fed. And they feast in wars. It becomes a spiritual battleground. This is why names like Hitler keeps coming up, because Nato was established after World War II. After the fall of Hitler, NATO was established. So what we're going through now, and that was in 1949, June 4th. NATO was established on that date. So we're talking about something that has been steaming up for a very long time. Actually, if we look back at the last 3 conflicts, they all are rooted or have deep roots, rather. They all have deep roots. Russia and Ukraine have deep roots. We see this goes back all the way to the Soviet Union, all the way back to 1991. The conflict with Palestine and Israel goes back decades. And just like the conflict in Afghanistan in the U.S. goes back decades. So all of the conflict we're seeing is basically karmic, because none of this stuff is new. So all of these conflicts have been brewing for quite some time now, and as we see in some examples, actually decades. And then things are just blowing up over things that have been brewing for decades. So definitely expect whatever conflict comes up within these next 4 years will be old wounds being reopened So expect old wounds to be reopened. Because you see, this is all we've been seeing. And this is what we will continue to see. And that's why I mentioned China with Taiwan, because there's always a fear that China may advance towards Taiwan, as Taiwan is in the same predicament as a independent nation, separate from China, and who has allied with the US and others. So if China was to ever make a move, then we will defend Taiwan. Or that's at least an agreement. So that Taiwan can maintain its independence. So everything we will continue to see in the coming years will be these old wounds that will require new band-aids, new stitches. Old wounds that require new stitches. So that's pretty much it. I'm definitely not going to be too long-winded. Again, the energy doesn't really require that. Again, I just wanted to use absolute patience. Because again, I say one thing out of turn, then the whole video can be deleted without warning. So I definitely, I'm going to keep this up and see if it stays up. And if it stays up, then I'm all right. I'll keep doing more of these, talking about current events. We don't have to just, talk about the spiritual, but you see, I always put the astrology and the spirituality into it. So even if we're talking about current events, we can still get a spiritual perspective. So if everything goes well with this video, it'll stay up. If not, then, we have to switch up the topics, or I just have to be a little bit more covert. Like just talking about these things, but not actually putting them in the actual title. So I'll still talk about it. It just won't be the title of the video. It'll be a little bit harder to find, which is, when I was doing that, I wasn't having any problems. As you see, I didn't say some crazy things. It wasn't until I actually started putting these things into the title that now it became problematic. So once again, hopefully that is not the case here. So this is why I just wanted to remind everyone. Definitely continue to support the channel, as these restrictions and the censorship will continue. And if anything does occur, you can always find me on the website, asharenew.com. So if anything happens, the website will always be available. So there's no worries there. But I'm going to do my best to be civilized about, talking about serious things. It'll be a little challenge for me. Normally I'll just be all over the place, because it don't be as serious. But this is something that required a lot more seriousness and patience. Basically, the Saturn energy had to come with the Saturn energy. So the message: technomancy, occult language. Keep moving forward with your technomancy. Prepare for the next 4 years. Know that old wounds will require new stitches, even in our personal lives. So expect some old wounds to require some new procedures to keep that energy tamed. Because again, we are in the underworld. Drill music will continue to be the anthem for this underworld energy. So we may even see a different sound or hear a different sound in 2026. Expect a different type of sound. Expect things to change rapidly going into Taurus. Because Uranus is already in Taurus, Western-wise. It will be going into Gemini. So you decide for yourself, is Uranus in Aries or is it in Taurus? Which position makes more sense? So I speak from the position of Aries, and others will speak from the position of Taurus. Collect whatever data you need to come to your final conclusion. And with that, I bear peace. 93, 93, 93.